Stand by, Ricky, because we are now joined by CBS News' justice reporter Paula Reid, who was actually at the hearing, this first hearing of Paul Manafort and Rick Gates. Paula, tell us what went down at that hearing.
Paul Manafort and his business associate Richard Gates, they entered the courtroom around 1:45. This was the most packed federal courtroom I have ever seen in my 5 years of covering federal court cases. They entered by themselves. They awkwardly sort of held their hands behind their backs, even though they were not restrained in any way. They came and they both joined their lawyers at a table. The judge asked them both to stand up, state their name, and also pledge that they, of course, will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. From then, it was their lawyers who did the talking, and both men, their lawyers, both entered a plea of not guilty on all counts for both men.
Okay, so where do things go from here? And since you gave such a great description of what you saw, the physicality of these two men coming in with their hands behind their backs, although not restrained, what were the expressions on their faces?
It's probably not a good day to be Paul Manafort or Richard Gates. One thing that really caught us off guard was that Mr. Gates has not yet retained an attorney. He says he intends to do so. So he had a temporary public defender helping him today. But that was a real shock. A lot of people asking, did he not know this was coming? How is it possible that you would be facing this kind of legal situation, such a high-profile legal situation, and not have secured yourself some type of counsel, especially when you're in a situation where you can afford it? So neither one of them looked terribly happy. They were not speaking to the media. Most of their lawyers also offered us no comment when we approached them. I will say, however, on the other side of the room, the special counsel attorneys, Andrew Weissman was one of them. He had a few other members of his team. They all looked pretty happy. Pretty good day for them.
I know that you were in the hearing, so you might not have been able to get this information that Ricky and I were just talking about. But during the White House press briefing, Paula, Sarah Huckabee Sanders implied that they had information that the Mueller investigation might be, quote, concluded soon. Do you have any insights into why Huckabee Sanders might have said that?
It's a little loud here. I think you said that Sarah Huckabee Sanders suggested that the investigation could be close to closing.
Yes, that's what she was implying, and she implied it twice during the White House press briefing. Do you have sources telling you that that could be the case?
No, I have sources who have been telling me since the outset that that is actually not true at all, that an investigation of this scale and scope could take years. And repeatedly, I have been told that this particular arrest, this is not the culmination, this is not the end, this is just one step on the path to try to answer this larger question of whether or not the Trump campaign actually worked with Russia. And in order to do that, Special Counsel Mueller needs some cooperation. And one way to get cooperation is to bring these kinds of business offense charges against witnesses who could potentially be valuable. So what Sarah Huckabee Sanders is saying goes completely against people I've spoken with who have been intimately involved in this investigation from the beginning.
So we had known for about 24 hours that we could see an indictment today, and that's what we got with Manafort and Gates. The guilty plea that was unsealed today by George Papadopoulos, who was a foreign policy advisor to Trump, described by Sarah Huckabee Sanders as simply a volunteer with extremely limited involvement in the campaign today. We, Ricky and I, have been talking about the information that has come out of the legal documents unsealed on that case. What does that say about Special Counsel Mueller? That these indictments came out at the same time, yeah.
Oh, well, Robert Mueller is making a statement. We have not seen him today. We have not heard from him today, but he has made a statement. Clearly the information that this was coming, this leaked. As a result of that, cameras were lining up to catch Paul Manafort, going to the FBI to turn himself in this morning. Of course, we were all here to cover the events. The special counsel released a very unusual, very rare press release about these charges, and then they waited just about long enough for us to digest the details of the very sensational case against Mr. Gates and Mr. Manafort before unveiling this totally unexpected separate case in Chicago, where it's clear they have a plea deal signaling that this person, who, however you describe his involvement in the campaign, he was involved in the campaign. The president knew who he was, described him as being, quote, excellent. He is clearly cooperating with Robert Mueller. So the special counsel has truly made it clear today he is going to use aggressive, very public tactics to get to the heart of what he's been asked to investigate.
When we talk about the Manafort Gates case, what happens to these men after this preliminary hearing now?
So I left about halfway through. Once we had a guilty plea, I left our associate, Bo Erickson, in there. They're going to hash out some terms of their release. It is absolutely not expected that these guys are going to go to jail. They're going to go home, but they'll have to have relinquished their passport. There may be some terms of their release where they can and cannot travel, who they can and cannot talk to. Right now, that is being hashed out in this courtroom.
Do you have any other indications that we should expect any other indictments forthcoming in coming days on Mueller's investigation? And also, I wonder if you have any insights into why we saw these indictments today against Manafort and Gates when this ostensibly just a financial crimes, a straightforward investigation, straightforward charges, as our Jan Crawford Greenberg has described, why they came out today.
It's unclear to me why this is happening today specifically, but I think you do see a couple of developments that you need to pay attention to. First of all, this whole issue of uranium-1. This is something that the Republicans are really trying to pound the drum, that this was an investigation that the FBI didn't look into sufficiently, whether or not the Obama administration, specifically Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, whether or not they assessed sufficiently whether or not there was any misdeeds in that particular deal. Now, while that appears to be about Secretary Clinton, you have to remember that Robert Mueller was the head of the FBI at that time. And as there are increasingly calls, there's now a congressional investigation into that uranium-1 deal, as there are increasingly calls to look into that, as there's more attention on that, you have to recognize part of that is a long-term strategy to discredit Special Counsel Mueller. So it is easy to see a world in which he wanted to send a message right back that he is not fazed and he is tending to his business. And if you read these indictments, he has a lot of evidence to work with, even if he never even gets to the question of conspiracy or this collusion question. I mean, for the president's former campaign chairman to be indicted in 12 counts, specifically for lying all the way up until last fall, that is very significant. That is not great for the Trump administration. And today I would say Mueller's had a few wins. He's issued these indictments and he's shown that he already has a cooperating witness.
I just, as I was reading about the indictment process, basically the way this all happened is that a grand jury was presented with evidence and they decided to go forward with these indictments. Do we know if that grand jury is still convened to be looking at further evidence and what that could portend for potentially more charges against Manafort?
Oh, yes, absolutely. We know that one of the reasons we suspected Manafort would be the one charged today is because we know sources have confirmed to us that many of the witnesses that have gone before the grand jury have been related to his business dealings. That's why Manafort was sort of the obvious suspect for who would be the first indicted. But absolutely, that grand jury continues to be a tool that Robert Mueller is using to sort of present evidence, not just about Manafort, but about other people that he's looking at in this probe. But I will also say that having a grand jury indict someone, that's a pretty low bar. It's probable cause. It's not very difficult to present evidence against someone to a grand jury and get an indictment. The much higher standard, the much more difficult thing is to convict someone. So we do have to remember that an indictment, it does not mean you're guilty. It just means a grand jury says, yeah, there's enough information to bring charges here.
Okay, Paula Reid, thank you.